So this is my recap of The Private Lives of Nashville Wives, Season 1, Episode 4, Get Out. So I'm noticing a big increase in the number of people talking on Twitter about the show. I'm really excited because I do like the show a lot, and I like the idea of chatting with people about the show. So this particular episode has 3 main storylines. We see Gary and Cassie talking about Gary's new album that's coming out. We have Jenny and JT having a charity event at their house, which leads to some conflict between friends. And lastly, we have Sarah and Dallas. So I'm going to address each of the storylines in that order. So first off, we see Gary and Cassie talking about his new album and him as a father and kind of a little bit more of his background. So he was a Christian artist, and during sort of the height of his career, he was also, doing some cocaine. He said he didn't do cocaine as much, but he was always the guy who had it. And eventually that kind of toppled his career, led to some problems. And so now he's wanting to do a new album and see if he can make it back up to the top. And Cassie's going to be doing some backup lyrics. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about both of them is just their honesty about who they are. So, because I've been a producer on a reality show and a host, and in the process of that, I did interviewing, I did some of the casting, I did all that stuff. I've given a lot of thought to what makes someone on a reality show shine. That's just, I've been obsessed with it, Why is it that you can have a cast of 7 people and one of them will become a star and the other 6 just become has-beens? And my theory is that there is a one-word description of stars, and that is authenticity. The people that are just really comfortable in their own skin and are willing to share that with the audience, where they just say, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses, and they don't try to backpedal, they don't try to act, they don't pretend to be something they're not, that's just who they are. Now, I think that both Gary and Cassie have done a really good job early on of establishing this is who they are, here's their strengths and weaknesses, and that's just that. And I'm seeing the viewers respond to it. And that's not a slam against anybody else in the show, it just happens to be that Gary and Cassie have had the ability to share a big part of who they are. So, first episode, Cassie was like, yeah, I worked at Hooters, it was one of my favorite jobs. And just right away, she won me. Like, that was really cool. So if I met them in person, I would instantly feel like we were friends because they've been really honest about who they are. They wouldn't know who I am and it'd probably freak them out, but it's very likely that a lot of people feel that way. They feel like they know who these people are because of their honesty. So that's just me getting all philosophical. The second storyline is Jenny and JT. So they're doing an Asian-themed casino night at their house for charity. And Jenny's worried about, she doesn't know what's going on, and JT is an event planner for years and years, and so he's like, don't worry about it, I got it covered. And Jenny goes out with Cassie and Anna to pick out, kind of like costumes. It was kind of a weird costume party, and then it wasn't really themed. I don't know, it was kind of bizarre what people ended up wearing. But anyway, the day of, Jenny gets a call from Betty, who is Anna's twin sister and Raul's wife. And Betty's like, I didn't get an invitation. I don't know what to wear. And Jenny's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I got your address from Anna. And Betty's like, well, why didn't you call me? Which ends up being kind of a significant statement. So Jenny says, don't worry about it, just whatever you wear will be fine, that's great. And the party's that night, and Betty shows up, and they're like, oh, so do you have your donation? And Betty's like really embarrassed because she didn't even know it was a charity event. Totally understandable. I would be really embarrassed as well if I showed up at a charity event and I didn't have money for the charity. And then she goes in, and there's a silent auction, and they're auctioning off a guitar, and at some point they had kind of said, oh, well, we'll have a bunch of our friends sign it, we can auction this off for a charity. And the names had gotten thrown around that maybe Sarah and Dallas and Gary and Raul could sign it. Now the problem is Raul didn't go to the event. So when Betty goes up to the guitar, there's this little sign that says that these people will sign it, and Raul's name was on it, and he hasn't signed it. So Betty's, once again, she's upset because it makes it look like he committed to it and then flaked. So I totally get where she's upset. The same time, I totally get why Jenny didn't do it maliciously. It was not, I mean, she shouldn't have had the sign there, but I can understand how a series of small missteps kind of led to this problem. And Betty's just really on her about it. And it ends up being that Anna buys a guitar so that the issue's settled, everyone's fine. But it eventually kind of comes out that Betty feels left out. And you go, oh, I get it. I get all the subtext. I get why she was upset that Jenny didn't get the address from her and all this. So it's not just this charity thing, although I would probably be upset as well if I was Betty, or at least I'd be annoyed. So I don't think there was certainly no maliciousness on anyone's part, and no one freaked out inappropriately, but I kind of understand how this whole thing happened. So I guess we're going to be seeing more of this next week, is what the previews imply. Now the last storyline is the least fleshed out and the most impactful. So for weeks, people have been talking about how unhappy Sarah is and how lonely she is and the struggles in her marriage. But the footage hasn't really been telling that story. So I've been kind of wondering what's going on. The footage doesn't disagree. It just, people were talking about it more than we were seeing it. And now we kind of find out why. So Sarah goes to Georgia with Dallas and her band, and like he comes in a little bit late to the performance, and he wasn't quite as concerned as her when she couldn't get a sound check, but nothing to me as the viewer significantly, like I wasn't watching going, oh man, this is awful. But they kept talking about how awful it was. So I was kind of like, huh. Well, what we find out at the end of the episode is that Dallas has moved out and they are getting a divorce. They filed and everything. Now, they do not owe me an explanation as a viewer. I don't feel that just because they're on TV, I need to see everything. But it does kind of make sense because the footage wasn't really there. Obviously, it's an incredibly private thing. But, so they just had to kind of tell us what happened. So they just told us basically that things weren't working out. And I feel awful for her. Not only to go, anyone who has to go through divorce knows that's just awful, let alone like you're on TV and you've made all these commitments. And she did say on Twitter that she had considered, she wasn't sure if she wanted to go on with the show or if she wanted to quit. But she shared that she kind of decided to, so that other people could understand kind of her journey and maybe be helped by it. So anyway, that was the episode. I would love to see you on Twitter Monday. Hit me up, Rancher Nikki, and we can talk about the episode.